emphasis on the word draft. It's not final. The plan and this meeting can both be viewed online through YouTube, WOW, and Comcast. This is an opportunity for the public to have input. We also have sheets that are at the desk when you first come in, and those are for the public to go ahead and write comments. And please, if you have them done tonight, feel free to turn them in. If not, you can put them in a Dropbox at City Hall, or feel free to drop them off. At this point in time, I'd like to make a few introductions here. With us tonight that we'll be doing the presentation, number one would be, if you wouldn't mind raising your hand so people could see you, Brad Strader from MKSK, our planning firm, Anne Marie Kirby, also from a planning firm, and from CIB Planning, who's consulting with us, is Justin Sprague over here. And the format tonight will be MKSK will explain the process and presentation. At the end of that, we will take public comment. So having said that, Mr. Chair, the floor is once again yours.
Thanks, Hank. I just want to expand a little bit on what Hank said. As he mentioned, MKSK is going to do a presentation. There might be a little bit of dialogue between the Planning Commission and MKSK. We will open it up for public participation at the end. Given the history of how these meetings have been, we will probably limit public participation to 2 minutes per person. And to reinforce Hank's comment, this is almost conceptual in nature, so please don't see anything you see up on the screen today or anything you see in your packets, as we're going to turn around and do this tomorrow. This has a long way to go. These are merely ideas at this point. It would still go in front of the City Council for approval and then more public involvement, so want to make sure nobody gets too excited tonight. With that, yeah, if everybody could turn off their cell phones or at least silence them, please, for the meeting, it'd be appreciated. And with that, we'll turn it over to MKSK.
All right, thank you so much. And if you can't hear me, I can lower my mask too, so just let me know if you can't hear me. I'm Anne Marie Kirby from MKSK, the project manager for this master plan. We're excited to be showing you the draft plan and the recommendations, and look forward to hearing your feedback tonight. And joining me is Brad Strader from MKSK, who you've met before, and then Justin from CIB Planning, who is involved with creating the economic development strategy. So just tonight we'll be reviewing the top outcomes of the plan, taking a quick look at engagement. So we went over that extensively with you last time, so it's just kind of a recap. And then we'll show you how the draft plan is organized, and then go over the vision and goals for Huntington Woods, and then the overview of the plan recommendations. And finally, we'll go over where we are in the process and the next steps. So tonight we have a couple worksheets for you to fill out. You can fill those out while we're presenting. It's preferable if you turn those in to Hank tonight, but if you need additional time, that's fine. Please just email your form to him so you can get those comments back to us. The first worksheet here is for anyone to fill out in the audience too, and Planning Commission. Is just general comments you have about each of the sections of the plan. And then the second worksheet is for Planning Commission to fill out tonight. We want you to prioritize the actions of the plan, so that might take some additional time. So again, if you need to turn that into Hank later, that's fine. So for the top outcomes of the plan, we've gone over this with you before, but just want to kind of a reminder of what to expect from the master plan. Meeting the criteria for redevelopment ready certification program with assistance from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And then, one of the top priority things that we've heard from the community is preserving the residential character of the city. And then also weaving in sustainability practices, including green infrastructure, and then redevelopment and housing opportunities along commercial corridors, looking for those, where are those and what are the focus areas, and then also coordinating with the diversity, equity, and inclusion plan process. And then all of these recommendations are based on and blended with best practices, the MEDC RRC criteria, our experience, and then feedback from the community and city officials. So the community and stakeholder input was really a critical component of the planning process. Planning Commission has served as the guiding body throughout this process. We met with you virtually and in person to discuss issues and opportunities and best practices. During our last working session with you, we focused on a few different topic areas and then asked for your guidance to help frame the recommendations. And then throughout this process, we also had a project website which details events, and we had a survey on there and also has the process information. In June, we had a community workshop. We had over 100 people come to that workshop. It was actually held in this gym to give input. And then following that workshop in July, we released a survey. We had over 560 responses on that. The survey had similar questions that the workshop had for priority improvements in the city. And then also in July, we had a stakeholder virtual meeting with MEDC, Oakland County, and invited property owners along the business corridors to attend that to discuss redevelopment opportunities and resources. So throughout the engagement, the Community and Planning Commission, we focused on confirming and refining the goals and strategies from the previous master plan, as well as identifying new priorities. So some of the ones that were identified as top priorities included addressing stormwater management, maintaining roads, increasing sustainability, and then parks and recreation opportunities. Additionally, residents would like to see more diverse housing opportunities, crosswalk and street improvements, and then also safety. So this is how the plan is organized. We split it up into 5 different sections. It includes an executive summary, which provides a condensed summary of the entire plan and the main takeaways. And then we provided a summary of community feedback. We also go into the vision and the goals, which highlight where the city would like to be over the next 10 years. The heart of the plan is focused on the existing conditions and recommendations. So this section is split up into several different topic areas, and I'll go into that next and talk about what those are. And then finally, the action plan has strategies that help carry out the vision and the goals. So these are the existing conditions and recommendations section. This is split into several different topic areas. Existing conditions were split up to precede the relevant topic areas so that recommendations would then immediately follow those. So for example, if you take the complete streets section, this follows the existing conditions data that shows things like traffic volume, existing sidewalk connections, and transit routes. I'll go into more detail of each of these topic areas and their recommendations in a little bit. So a vision statement is an inspirational statement or collection of statements that really encompasses the overall goals for the community. So in this case, there are several statements that Huntington Woods has put together. The vision that was described in the 2008 master plan and then refined for the 2015 master plan update is still mostly representative of where the community envisions itself. So the overall length of the vision, though, we condensed down in order to provide a more succinct vision that can clearly be presented to the community. So I'm not going to read this entire thing, but it does focus on identifying the city as a close-knit community that provides superior services, including recreational opportunities. The city will continue to be known for its historic residential character and offer a variety of housing types. The commercial corridors of the city will include mixed-use development, and the city will continue to be walkable, and there will be an emphasis on safe pedestrian connections, and then also targeting city streets to be enhanced, including with green infrastructure. And then when asked to prioritize goals from the current master plan, the top 3 responses included maintaining city services without tax increases, maintaining and improving parks and recreation facilities, and promoting long-term stability of residential neighborhoods. So we kept many of the goals on the plan with some refinements and then consolidated some of those together. So now we have 10 goals. I think before there was about 15 goals. So we consolidated some of those together because they had similar things that they were talking about. The draft goals include maintaining the excellent quality of city services while avoiding tax increases, promoting the long-term stability of the city's residential neighborhoods, encouraging quality infill development and residential additions that reflect the character of existing homes, promoting a diversified housing stock, focusing on targeting commercial corridors, and then in planned locations at the city's perimeter, encouraging mixed-use development with high-quality retail and restaurant uses. And then the next few goals include maintaining and improving the city's park system and recreational facilities and programs, and promoting the preservation and enhancement of trees, urban forests, and natural resources and features, and then using sustainable best practices to protect those. promoting continued walkability and strengthening pedestrian connections, and maintaining and improving and beautifying the city's road network, and then creating a more welcoming environment that promotes diversity and inclusion in the city. So your future land use map is one of your guiding tools in your master plan. The majority of the city's land use will remain as is. So the areas that you see in orange, those are identified as preserve. And we identified areas of the city to enhance and invest based on our engagement with the community. So primarily looking at streets to enhance, we targeted Woodward and 11 Mile Road to enhance there. And then people would also like to see the area around the golf course maintained. So that's also shown as enhanced. Areas to invest in, this is where redevelopment would occur. Includes areas along Coolidge, the city campus area, and we also show all of Woodward. But here, again, property owner interests will determine where properties will be targeted. One of our top priority items we heard that the community wanted addressed in the plan was sustainability and managing stormwater runoff. So we included a section in the plan that discusses best practices related to green infrastructure. The city can use different techniques to help mitigate and capture stormwater runoff, including rain gardens, pervious pavers, and stormwater trees and curb extensions. So we go into a little bit of detail on each one of those. And then overall recommendations in this section include recommendations from the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, including maintaining parks and planting trees to create shade. And then for green infrastructure, we included potentially requiring parking lots over a certain threshold to have more rigorous stormwater management practices. Single-family, two-family residential properties, so this would be for like new construction and additions over a certain threshold, could be required to show retention of the first flush storm events. So this means this is the initial surface runoff of a rainstorm where water pollution entering the storm drains is usually more concentrated than the remainder of the storm. Residential properties should also be required to redirect all downspouts to vegetated areas, away from other adjacent properties, away from impervious surface areas. There could also be some educational awareness around stormwater runoff and best practices resources for residents. And then also the last one is implementing green infrastructure along key corridors like 11 Mile Road. And I'll go into that a little bit more detail when we talk about the complete streets
and I think
plan.
the thing to keep in mind for the Planning Commission tonight as we go through this kind of overview,
Brad, could you speak up into the microphone?
Sure.
Thank you.
the key thing for the Planning Commission this evening is it's a study session to get your feedback on the recommendations. So when we hit recommendations, we'll do this at the end, but just be kind of keeping track. And at the end, when we go through the recommendations, ask if it's clear what the recommendations are, if some are higher priority than others, if you think something is missing, or if there's something that you think we didn't get right and either needs to be rewritten or it really isn't a priority. So we're going through the whole thing for the kind of the audience, but for the Planning Commission, we wanted to get and be thinking of these. And I think it's fine to stop us at any time when we hit these recommendations. If you have any particular questions now, it's fine to ask at this point, and then you can ask again when we get to the chart at the end.
So the plan also includes a complete streets plan, like I just mentioned, with best practices, highlighting enhanced bike connections, pedestrian connections, and enhancing transit amenities. And this is the map showing recommended improvements to the city corridors. Some of the key recommendations include enhancing pedestrian crossings along 696 and 11 Mile in Woodward. New pedestrian crossings are proposed along 11 Mile near Scotia and Meadow Crest. And then this will really help provide safer pedestrian connections to the school. So we're also recommending that a safe routes to school study be completed for the pedestrian crossings along 11 Mile Road to really help identify and confirm where those new crossings should be, and also look at where light timing for pedestrians might currently be insufficient, because that actually was something that was brought up at the last meeting. Someone was concerned about the light timing, so that could be included in a safe routes to school study. And then another highlighted improvement is potential lane reconfiguration along 11 Mile Road. So the average annual daily traffic along 11 Mile Road is around 12,000 vehicles, and this falls within the recommended threshold for the lane reconfiguration, which is around 18,000 or less for 4 to 3 lane reduction. As mentioned earlier, there was a study already completed for this corridor, and that's done in conjunction with Berkeley. Green infrastructure could be implemented along here if it's a 4 to 3 lane reduction, but further study coordination will need to be done with Berkeley. We do suggest doing a pilot project to help confirm the recommendations and provide some education to drivers, pedestrians, residents. You could test out the design ideas, including crossings, without the time and cost burden of a full construction project. And then if it doesn't work, then you can just go back to the same road design. So it's a temporary pilot study, could be done for a couple of weeks just to test out the idea. The city hired a consultant to complete the diversity, equity, inclusion study, Voliere Consulting and Jade Strategies, to determine how the city can be more welcoming. They engaged city commissioners, they released a survey and held focus groups and one-on-one conversations. They found that the majority of residents desire diversity and that the areas lacking most in diversity are related to race and income. And common themes discovered in this process included the need to dedicate more resources for more services for seniors. There's a lack of diversified housing, and there are opportunities for mixed-use development that can include more housing in the city. And then overall, there are some significant barriers to entry to the city, including higher housing costs. So CIB planning came to your last planning commission meeting to talk about the economic development strategy. So I'm going to turn it over to Justin so he can summarize that strategy for you and talk about it for a few minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So we wanted to talk about a few things that we found to be most important to helping with your future economic development security and also helping with redevelopment. So first and foremost, working with partners, having a good business retention program in place. When we talk to stakeholders, one of the things that they stated is that the lease rates are good right now, but it's difficult to attract new retail to the community because there are not a lot of vacancies. So those spaces, the only way to really bring in new development would be to try to redevelop some of those existing spaces. Secondly, utilizing mixed use can give you an opportunity to diversify your housing options in the community. So if you have an opportunity to work with property owners along Woodward, Coolidge, or 11 Mile to redevelop those properties, encourage them to develop them into a multi-story mixed use that fits into the community. It doesn't have to be a monstrosity, but something that fits into the community where you can have housing on the third, fourth, or second or third floor to try to diversify some of the housing. Next, working with the Woodward community and adjacent communities, along with Oakland County, SEMCOG, MEDC, and other partners, to secure some funding and potential financial resources to enhance the redevelopment opportunities along those corridors. But we wanted to show that there are several tools that you have access to now that can assist with having developers or incentivizing developers to look at redeveloping those spaces. The best primary option, in our opinion, is utilization of a commercial rehabilitation district. And this would be a partnership with the city to provide a potential abatement for redevelopment up to 10 years. The Community Revitalization Program is a program through the Michigan Economic Development Corporation and can be used to support new mixed-use development on any of the commercial corridors. The Brownfield Act is a tool that can be utilized by the city to help developers prepare and remediate sites that may need to be redeveloped or may need remediation to be developed. The Michigan Strategic Fund, and then looking at the idea of a municipal nonprofit public-private partnership where the city could actually partner with a developer on city-owned property to redevelop those spaces into spaces that meet the goals and the needs of the community. So with that, I would also recommend, upon completion of this study, that the city start to look at ideas to market yourself to developers and try to attract new investment. There's a great story to tell here, economically speaking, and I think this community, based on your existing conditions, can attract the type of retail, restaurant, and entertainment spaces that you need or that you would like. It's just a matter of telling that story and putting it out there and letting people know that you do have space and willing participants to try to redevelop specific sites. So with that, I can answer any questions as we wrap up.
All right, thanks, Justin. So as part of that strategy, we included some corridor plans, and I know you guys have seen this a couple times now, so I won't spend too much time in these. But as you know, Woodward is one of the gateways to your community. However, there's some room for improvement here to make it more pedestrian-friendly and opportunities for reinvestment. So we've showed some concepts here to show what redevelopment can really look like along Woodward. And realistically, these improvements would probably have to happen in phases. So we show these as a series of 3 phases along Woodward. And the first one focusing on streetscape improvements, improving the access drive along Woodward, creating a landscape buffer between the service drive and Woodward, and then widening the sidewalks to help create opportunities for spaces to gather, outdoor dining, and then switching the parking to parallel parking. This would really be needed if the sidewalk is to be widened to make that room. And then phase 2 shows facade improvements and additions to existing buildings, adding a little bit more density, opportunities for housing. This would really also be a chance to include some sustainability initiatives like electric vehicle parking, car sharing, more bike parking, and green infrastructure improvements in the parking areas. And then the last phase, we show more build-out and infill development happening, shared parking areas, and we've also incorporated a designated bus rapid transit lane. This aligns with the recent mobility-oriented development study that was done by the Rapid Transit Authority, and a summary of that was included in the master plan update. And this would also help influence and promote investment along Woodward. Then we also looked at Coolidge Highway. So this is a smaller business cluster, and essentially it's the Rite Aid and the Chase Bank. There's newer sidewalks here, so there's some improvements happening, but overall there's some underutilized areas and also kind of minimal landscaping, so that could also be enhanced. So again, we did phases here in our concepts, and we show in the initial phase you can implement some lower cost strategies like some gateway landscaping along the intersections and street trees to really enhance the area. And then we also show, for the second phase, we show some infill development happening, including some 2- to 3-story mixed-use development where the Chase Bank is currently located, but indicating that they could still remain at this location, but have a more up-to-date building. And then also show some townhouses where the existing Chase ATM and parking lot is located. This is a pretty underutilized space, and maybe shifting that ATM to the other site. Again, these are conceptual, so it's this, something that can be used to kind of help drive reinvestment and be used for ideas. And then again, coordinating with organizations like MEDC and Oakland County would be important here to help locate resources and incentives for redeveloping these areas.
I think the key thing to keep in mind for the Planning Commission, and you've already heard this, but some members of the audience may not have heard this at previous meetings, but the Woodward property and these properties along Coolidge are privately owned. So these are just concepts to show what could happen here, and the idea is to incentivize the market and the property owners to see something could happen here. The reason Justin's here and was on the team working with the city to show you what tools are available in terms of other organizations or working with organizations or economic development tools that are out there that could be a partnership between the developer and those entities or organizations to help redevelopment. So these plans are showing some potential redevelopments that could happen on these properties that would be if they're in the master plan, would be supported by the city, but it takes the interest of the private property owners to realize it. And so over time, you'd expect maybe some of these to happen, some of these may not happen. The actual site plan could change depending on the market and so forth, but the interest is to be shown in the plan to get things rolling. And Moore said that for the benefit of the audience that wasn't at maybe some of the previous meetings that already heard kind of that cautionary note at previous meetings.
And then we also included the city campus area We talked about at length in our last meeting with you. This includes City Hall, the Public Safety Building, the Public Works Building, and then the Senior Park. All the buildings here are outdated, but one in particular, the Public Safety Building, is really functionally obsolete. During the visioning session and survey, residents were prompted to vote on options for this site, so that the options included relocating the DPW building and sharing services with another city, rehabbing and upgrading the Public Safety Building, selling all or a portion of the city's buildings to be redeveloped into a mix of uses, or leaving the site as is. So during your last meeting, this was discussed quite a bit. And then based on the results of the survey, the workshop, and then your comments, you recommended that the city should focus on rehabbing and upgrading the Public Safety Building. We've also noted that an RFP could be sent out to rehab the existing building. We also included the possibility of creating an RFP for interested developers to create site concepts and describe potential uses on the site, including how the city campus area could be integrated into the redevelopment. This is a potential option that wouldn't necessarily mean committing to anything, but would provide some insight into what could be reimagined here. If this were to be pursued, obviously the community would still have to be very involved in this process. As a side note, the city has also engaged with a consultant to do an energy audit in 2022 of all of these buildings, the library and the rec center, to determine the overall building efficiency. The 2008 plan included a preservation plan. This remains a really important tool for the city, so we included a summary of that in this master plan update. The preservation plan talks about the rich historic character of the city and the 2 historic districts. Also talks about residential design guidelines that were created to extend beyond those historic districts and to help preserve other areas of the city. So these are just the recommendations that are still relevant today that are included in the plan, including enforcing regulations, developing marketing materials for homeowners and architects to help ensure regulations are being met, meeting with neighborhood groups to develop specific standards, educating local real estate and design professionals about guidelines, developing an architectural pattern book, and then, among other recommendations. And then the last section of the recommendations is the zoning plan. So for the most part, there weren't really a lot of significant recommended changes to the ordinance or the map. Your zoning ordinance already has integrated many things we would recommend in terms of best practices. So that includes allowing for mixed uses along commercial corridors, having design guidelines in place. You already have all of that. There is a recommendation to rezone the city campus area to provide some flexibility for that site, and then also rezone the property at the corner of 11 Mile and Woodward to be consistent with the rest of the Woodward corridor. And then we have also some suggested sustainable standards that could be integrated into the zoning ordinance, and I mentioned those a little earlier in the sustainability section. So the action plan is the last section of the plan. This provides guidance on implementing the master plan, contains actions, timeframes, priorities. We'll also be including in here key partners in the revised draft for each of the topic areas. It's something that hasn't been included quite yet. The action plan should be revisited by Planning Commission on an annual basis to determine what has been accomplished so far and review priorities to make sure that those priorities still match up. And then this is an example of what those pages look like in the action plan. We arranged it by topic and then by priority level. And again, those are draft priority levels, so we're anticipating getting feedback from you and then also from the community down the road. We'll have a online survey that people can rate each of the priorities in the plan that will come out once that public comment period opens up. So the X's on here that you see, that just kind of indicates what areas of the plan that action touches. And the next steps, so we're actually in the final phase of this update process. We're shifting into plan review and revisions, and then we'll start shifting into the adoption phase. So next steps include your review of the plan and getting comments back to us. And then at your next meeting, if you're ready for it, you can forward the revised draft plan to City Commission, who would then approve and then distribution of the plan and okay the opening of that 63-day comment period. So those are kind of your next steps. And that's all we have tonight. So we're here to help address any questions you have and look forward to your comments.
Great. Thank you. Thanks to all of you. I know it's a ton of work, and there's a lot of effort that went into this, so I appreciate all of it. There's a ton of concepts in here. There's a ton of ideas. I just kind of want to point out to everybody, the commission and the public, if you go to the action plan and look at the goals, I think those are a great summary of kind of everything we've been talking about. People tend to get very caught up in the specifics of some of the concepts in here, but I think everybody looking at those goals, I don't know that anybody would really disagree that those are probably directions that we should go. So with that said, we'll open it up for comments from the commission. And Sheldon, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. A couple things. Hank, I don't remember the last one being this, or certainly the first one being this long. What I see added to this particular one that I don't recall being in the last one, or certainly the first iteration, which was what, 2009?
2008.
2008, was the equity and diversity provisions and the commercial development. I don't think those were included initially. I don't know if they were in the revision. Certainly not as explicitly as they are here. I don't know if your recollection is any different than that.
They're in here different, and they're in here for a reason. The city of Huntington Woods is really second to none in their desire to become a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable community. And as a result, they commissioned a DEI study from Volar Consulting and Jade Strategies. What we're trying to do with the master plan is to integrate some of the things that we've learned from that into our practices. And part of that is why we want to open the Woodward corridor, why we want to take a look at the potential development of the City Hall campus, to look at what's there on Coolidge and see if there's not an opportunity for us to do some things with that. Does that mean we're going to tear down everything? And the answer is absolutely not. But the answer is that we need to look at everything that may be available to us. And the DEI study did open our eyes to a lot of things about Huntington Woods. So the answer is no. It wasn't there before. It is there now, and it is there for good reason.
Is the diversity and equity study available on the city website?
The diversity and equity study we just got back, and it'll be on there in the master plan consultant. It's not something that they did. It's something that was done by Volar Consulting, and we'll have it on the website for people to take a look at.
Okay.
And Hank, just to note too, it's also included in the appendix of the master plan too.
Yes, it's included in, if you take a look at the plan online, you'll see that it is, what we did is we put the study right there, and we put it as an appendix so that people can see. And part of the reason for that is number one, well, we paid for the study. And number two, we want to make sure that the people can get it, can read it. And if there's a better mousetrap out there and somebody has an idea, we want to hear it. Huntington Woods is filled with some very, very smart people. And we want to avail ourselves of their intellect and avail ourselves of the opportunity for them to provide us with some kind of method or perhaps some kind of comment or something that can further our desires in this process. And that's how we want to get it out. So that's why it's out there already. But it's not out there as a separate document, but I can assure you it will be.
Okay, thank you.
I think the other point too is diversity and equity and economic development are sort of new goals and recommendations here. Part of that is also from the MEDC and the redevelopment ready community status that the city worked with MEDC to obtain, and so it requires these be included in the master plan. The other thing that I think is new compared to the last two master plans is sustainability and stormwater, because that's become such a hot issue from the public and the planning commission. It was in the request for proposal. So having more recommendations related to sustainability and ways to improve stormwater quality and reduce flooding is also new to the plan, so.
All right, that brings up, well, one's an incidental question. Where's the southeast corner of 11 and Woodward? I think that's Royal Oak, but I could be wrong about that. I think you're talking about the northeast corner of the city.
It is the northeast corner of the city.
Okay,
That's
because
just-
you make a number of references to the
Yeah.
southeast corner of Woodward and 11 Mile, and that's the church on the corner in Royal Oak. And I think that's,
Yeah, again, and I
We'll
appreciate
make that correction. Fair enough.
Yeah,
that's a wrong reference. Okay, finally, my last question is, the word sustainability, it appears countless times in this report. I'd like to know what that means to you. Because it doesn't, I don't know what it means.
Yeah, I think
It's
sustainability.
a
in
real
this
fuzzy
context,
concept.
We should probably define it as primarily stormwater management for sustainability.
Okay. It just, I don't see that particularly identified in there. I mean, it's included in a lot of places. But I guess I'd like a more
Yeah, we should probably,
careful reference in
I
there.
think that's a good point, and we probably relied on the MEDC definition of sustainability, and I'm not sure all of that applies to Huntington Woods, so maybe we should base it on MEDC says this, and this is what it means in terms of the Huntington Woods master plan, so.
Yeah,
That's a
I mean,
good catch.
the impression I have is that it's a keyword that people are looking for. So
Yes.
it's in there. But I don't know, how high is up, I don't know. I'd like some more specific identification of that particular idea. That's all the comments. I'm anxious to hear the other comments from the other members of the public and the commission.
Thanks, Sheldon. Rick?
In the action plan, as I'm going through it, I'm noticing some items that are not necessarily duplicates, but maybe should be combined with other items so we can reduce the sheer number of action items we have. And my comments on these forms will reflect that. That's my only comment.
Okay.
that's great, Rick, thank you.
Todd?
I'm going to hold off. I'm going to hold off. I think Sheldon has hit on a lot of things I had questions on, so I'm good for now. I'm waiting to hear what we hear from the general public.
Thanks, Todd. Jill?
Yeah, it's not really a question, more of just an observation, but it seems like, I guess I'm interested in how this normally works with the recommendations made about, like, for both the street designs and also, I think it was under the economic development, just, I mean, knowing that, we're talking about all the Woodward corridor and all these private, property owners there. I just don't know, I mean, I see some stuff on here which makes sense about, like, marketing strategies and stuff to try to encourage those property owners to make these changes. I just don't know how often that actually gets done. I think everybody in the community would say, we'd love to have Woodward, look a lot better, and the whole border of Huntington Woods. But I guess I kind of want to understand in other master plans where this is, I mean, I'd hate to see us invest so much there if we're going to have, difficulty getting any of these property owners to actually do the things that we'd like them to implement. So.
Do you want to help answer that, Kristen?
So part of that is just making sure that you have the vision in place and that you have the tools in place. And so when I referred to the Corridor Rehabilitation Act district as being one of the first opportunities to kind of kick off a new investment, that's the city recognizing that we do have a plan that we want for the space. And when you create the district, now you're telling those investors that we have a tool in place that we're willing to partner with you on if you would choose to make an investment at this time. Putting a district in place doesn't cost the city anything. It doesn't cost investors anything. It just establishes the space to say, we're ready to do this business with you. and then tell that story. So that's a big piece is, you know, now that you have this tool, now that you have partners with Oakland County, Main Street Economic Development, and the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, start putting together specific messaging to the investors that you're seeking. And that's more feasible from the Planning Commission and from the city administration to start that process than it is to actually go out and do the investment or do the development. So through the master plan, between zoning, between the economic development tools, you're essentially creating the environment for investment to thrive.
Thank you.
I think maybe a couple other points on Woodward, because these are all good comments. So, yeah, it's kind of limited what the city can do, but Justin talked about some partnerships and other programs that are out there that the city maybe hasn't taken advantage of, and you may not want to take advantage of all those. A couple other communities along Woodward would include Ferndale and Birmingham, and they've probably been more active in promoting redevelopment. So Ferndale has a downtown development authority and TIFA funding, and they put capital investments on it, and they've done a lot of planning on Woodward. They've made a request to the Michigan Department of Transportation, who they have jurisdiction of all of Woodward, including the surface drives, the parking in the front in Huntington Woods that is actually under MDOT jurisdiction, and it hasn't really been reinvested. So Ferndale made a request to MDOT to start studying all of Woodward. Pleasant Ridge joined with Ferndale, so that study's going on now. I worked with Birmingham. Birmingham's City Commission is going to do a resolution either in December or January to also, similar to Ferndale, has asked MDOT to study pedestrian crossings and looking at lane conversions and traffic and transit and everything along Woodward as well. Royal Oak has been talking about it, but I think Royal Oak, there have been a lot of other studies on Woodward and they haven't seen MDOT really implement things. I think Royal Oak is waiting to see how MDOT reacts to Ferndale and Birmingham. I think Royal Oak is interested in also joining, so I think one of the things we're trying to get across here is Huntington Woods should pay very close attention with the adjacent communities in Oakland County. You don't want to have Huntington Woods left behind while they're doing Pleasant Ridge and Ferndale and Birmingham and maybe Royal Oak. So that's kind of one of the ideas, is that's one of the partners, and maybe working with the adjacent communities to get more attention from MDOT on Woodward in the future. So that's part of the plan, is to set the foundation for the request, and potentially out of the master plan we could say to MDOT, we also want MDOT to study Woodward. If you agree on the things that I'd like to have happen, what we heard from the public at the last meeting is, can't we at least approach MDOT to upgrade the service drives and maybe landscaping, and that would be kind of that phase one. So anyway, there's something else to keep in mind, and maybe if you think that that's important, we should emphasize that more in the action plan. So.
Yeah, I'm good.
Thank you. Chris?
No, most of the questions have already been asked for me. I'm just looking forward to hearing the public participation as well.
Thank you. Blake?
Thank you. So I think Sheldon had a couple of really good points. I agree wholeheartedly that sustainability needs is rather undefined and certainly needs better definition, because that's a bit of a slippery slope. There were a couple things that came up, and I think I've been present for all of these conversations, so forgive me if I'm missing something. And Brad, you may have addressed this a little bit in your comments, i.e. we're sort of watching what the other communities do, and some of those generate what would be deemed best recommendations. But there was more granularity in this plan than I think the last iteration. And just specifically, a couple of them came to mind, I think it was in zoning plan under recommendations, turning the business district into a transitional district. I mean, that's pretty granular, and yet I don't entirely understand that's your recommendation, that's one of the other consultants. How did we sort of get to that place? And I'm using that more as an example. Or bike lanes. We spoke about bike lanes, I think, at one of the previous meetings, and everyone was kind of like, yeah, bike lanes are fine, but is that really an essential expense relative to everything that we potentially have on our plate? So when we talk about those best recommendations, I'm just curious how those kind of end up on the list if they weren't necessarily on the commission's short list.
You want to answer those?
Yeah, so when we looked at all the recommendations, it was a combination of community input, our meetings with you, best practices, our expertise. So if there are things in there that don't maybe look quite right, just let us know and we can make adjustments or ask those questions. We're happy to make adjustments. I think when you're talking about the zoning ones, there weren't a lot of zoning recommendations that we had to make, but the one in particular you're talking about was related to the property at the corner of Woodward and 11 Mile. And we saw that as to be consistent with the rest of the Woodward corridor to make that the transitional district so it fits in with the rest of the Woodward corridor. But again, and that has also to do with the RTA MOD study, which has recommendations for a little higher density along that corridor. We see in the future potential for that area to be a main station area for the bus rapid transit line. So it's a pretty critical area, we feel, and I think that's why that recommendation is in there.
I think the transitional came out of the multi-community study of Woodward with the RTA that had Royal Oak and Pleasant Ridge and Huntington Woods, everybody, and that was kind of the nomenclature that everybody agreed to up and down Woodward. I think bike lanes, there were kind of pros and cons of bike lanes on 11 Mile, and the Planning Commission said no bike lanes. We wanted to go down to 3 lanes because it's safer and reduce speed and easier for pedestrians to cross and use that extra area for green infrastructure, the things we had images, and that would be consistent with the plan that Berkeley and Oak Park also adopted. So that came out of that old plan that Huntington Woods was part of, but that plan showed bike lanes or stormwater, and the Planning Commission here had said no bike lanes on 11 Mile, let's just have.
We did remove that from the map, so we aren't showing bike lanes anymore.
I mean,
on
again,
11
I'm
Mile.
just sort of throwing these out as questions. If it's a question for me and I'm, 3-4 meetings into this, presumably there are going to be questions in the community like, why are we spending time talking about bike lanes when we have other, and again, just as an example, bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, we pretty much took the
I
bike
think the
lanes
bike
out.
lanes were removed.
They're still like in the best practice portion of the Complete Streets plan, but it's not necessarily like part of the recommendations section. So it's still like a reference for you if you want to go back and say, hey, you know what, we would like to put a bike lane in. Let's see what some of those best practices are. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's part of the recommendations section. So I don't know if that's maybe a little confusing that it's part of the best practices, but those aren't necessarily the recommendations.
And there were a number of ideas that came out of the process so far that the Planning Commission said take that out of the plan, like changing setbacks and other things. So those were talked about before, but based on the direction from the Planning Commission, they were removed from the plan.
Great, thank you.
But I think anything that you bring up here that you think wasn't vetted more, that's why we have the meeting. And I looked at the 10 pages of goals and actions. And again, a lot of this is we tried to extract out of the old plan because this is an update, and some of that language we tried to modify. But I think 10 pages is too many. I would agree with the chair. And we tried to consolidate some, and sometimes we thought that those are recommendations from the old plan, and we'd be happy, we would agree with the idea of trying to reduce the list, because I don't think the plan should be more than like 4 pages or 5 pages of recommendations, not as many as we have. So
And
anything you can do to cross those out or consolidate would be appreciated.
The goal there was to show you, you had kind of reviewed the previous actions in the last plan, and then we took out ones that you said to remove. We left everything else in and then consolidated some of them, but then we added the new recommendations from this revised plan. So I agree, consolidating them makes sense, but we didn't want to just take some out that we didn't feel fit. So we want you to review those and let us know which ones to remove.
Blake, anything else?
No, thank you.
I don't think I have much else to add. Again, thank you. I agree with, skinning it down, consolidating it a bit. Hank, anything else to add before I start off with public participation?
No, I just want to, one thing, actually. I think what we want to do is we want to differentiate between the bike lanes that we have internally in the city of Huntington Woods and those proposed for the perimeter corridors. And I think that the bike lanes and the sharrows that we actually have, and then the signage that we have, which were part of a TAP grant where we partnered with Ferndale and other communities years ago, have worked well internally. Whether that would translate to well on 11 Mile Road, I have the same reservations that you all did. But I just wanted to point out that that was done as part of a grant. So as far as a cost, the cost to Huntington Woods was significantly less because of the grant opportunities that we were able to obtain.
Thanks, Hank. Okay, we'll open it up for public participation. Anybody that would wish to speak, please come up to the podium. Let us know your first name, your full name, your address. If you could keep your comments to about 2 minutes or so. And we'll start off with you. Sure, yep, right up here. Thank you. Give us your name and address for the record, please.
The mask, you can hear me clear.
Sure.
I'm Shimon Edud. We live on Edin, across to Sheldon, neighbors. I have to say, for all of this discussion about development and increase the size of the city and put this, and the bottom line is money. I just want to know how you're going to collect all of these resources and from whom? Taxes or any contribution or anything, for the future improvement of the city of Huntington Woods. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Hal Stack at 13108 Talbot Avenue, Huntington Woods. I have a couple of questions. Hope the consultants will be able to respond. So I think most of us would agree that any plan would have measurable goals, metrics, would have objectives that are smart, specific, measurable, assignable, time-related, etc. This plan does not seem to have that. You quite properly pointed out that plans should be periodically reviewed and revised as appropriate, and yet the Planning Commission indicated at the last meeting that once the plan is approved, they don't look at it again for 5 years or 6 years whenever the plan is up for renewal as required by the state. I hope that's not true, but that was what was said. The sustainability issue is recognized in the community as an important one. We have signs all over the community about climate action, and yet we do not have a single goal that focuses specifically on sustainability. And what we do have that we loosely call sustainability is pretty limited, particularly compared to what our neighboring communities are doing in terms of sustainability. Nor does the plan incorporate the plan that was done on energy in cooperation with EcoWorks, for example. I can't understand why that's not the case. So I hope that in the revision, you will actually take the issue of sustainability seriously and not just talk about better trees, and make it a serious, focused plan on sustainability. Clearly an area that we all agree is important to this community and our children, for that matter. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, comments are welcome to my questions.
Yeah, good evening, all. Jay Schwartz, 10014 Ludlow, since 1965. So next year is going to be my 57th year residing in this city. Generally, I think this plan gets off to a very good start, but I do have a couple of things that aren't mentioned in here at all that I would like to have the considered. Number one, the issues of forming a public safety district and a library district. What are the pros and the cons? Can it be done? And just for reference to everybody here, that I believe it's Hazel Park has a library district, and I know that also Hazel Park is joint with a fire district with another city that isn't even in Oakland County. So these are areas that need to be studied, both the library district and a public safety district. Now, the details, how it would work, tax revenue, voting, allocation of resources, that's all for the study. Let's get that on the agenda for starters right there. As for bike lanes, I agree with the previous comments that let's deprecate that issue right here and now. The one thing that I am absolutely want to make very, very clear is that in all of these efforts whatsoever, when we talk about redevelopment, that the use of eminent domain, that is, using the government to take property from others, even if it's compensated, should be absolutely and expressly written out, expressly said, no, we are not going to use eminent domain. And in accordance with that, when we talk about redevelopment, I am absolutely opposed to the use of tax holidays, tax abatements, call it whatever you want, a tax break, call it whatever you want. That is, using the power of to reduce taxes to incentivize redevelopment. I am absolutely opposed to that. Somebody's got to pay for those services. I don't want to be paying extra taxes or reduction or have to depend upon grants or something else to finance to make up for that, what is tax abatement. So tax abatements are off there. My only one comment about diversity is be very, very careful how you approach this subject. Yes, there is the surveys. Yes, there's the report. I agree with that. But this is one of those subjects that is so emotionally charged that there's what people are going to say in public or to a survey, and then there's what they're actually going to do or vote or propose. And that can be two different things. So be very, very careful, because I have spoken with other neighbors who don't necessarily put down what they're truly feeling because they don't want to be ridiculed. So that's a cautionary here. I have some other comments here, which I will submit in writing for the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to, I guess, note, this is the Planning Commission's master plan related to the state law requirements, what's included. So things like a public district and a public safety district, other things which may be good ideas, that'd be more for the city commission, and it's outside the master plan. So I have seen some master plans that say consider this. I worked with Bloomfield Hills, and they talked about that a little bit, but it's really outside of the purview of the Planning Commission. So I guess keep that in mind if you want to talk about it. But that would be, you could say, make these as a considerations for city commission, but that would not be something the Planning Commission would be dealing with. That would be city commission. So,
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Jeff Jenks, 13361 Ludlow, Huntington Woods, obviously. I'm concerned that the road along Woodward in front of the stores or the buildings is missed by MDOT. Right now, we have a tremendous amount of money that's coming in as relates to infrastructure. MDOT looks at the big roads, we look at the big roads and the little streets. MDOT is not used to dealing or thinking about streets. That should be heavily flagged so that it's replaced and becomes part of MDOT's job. And the reason now is we are going to have a huge amount of extra money for the next 2 years. I'm also concerned that you placed an aging population in DEI rather than discussed it in the regular report. Our senior population is increasing by 20% to 25% if you look at projections to 2045 or the new drafts on 2050. For people to completely ignore that is not wise, and what are the implications? Yes, you did it with senior housing and alternative forms. But there's a lot of other thinking that goes with that. I would like to see that not treated as diversity, but as a general issue, and what do we have to do as it relates to planning outside of parks and recreation. The other thing is, people really don't understand how Woodward can be redeveloped. There's a whole bunch of plans as have been presented, but we could get a lot more tax money off of Woodward, and it could be much more usable. And that was an issue that the public did not understand in Birmingham recently. I hope some of that can be focused more in there. And also, the next time you present the report, do it, on your website, or whomever's website it is. Don't do 2 pages, do 1 page, so it's easy to read and printable. Some of us are older, our eyes don't work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a note, I think we have a printer-friendly and the web-friendly version up there, but I'll double check. But there should be a printer-friendly version, so it's page by page on there.
It's there, but what I'm concerned about is on the website, when you go and look at that, those are double pages, compressed to one sheet. They should be single pages.
Okay, I'll double check, because I think we have 2 different links on there. So there should be a printer-friendly version on there for you to look at.
And I'm thinking, this was an idea we had for Woodward, but it's not in the action plan because we haven't talked about it. But after talking with some of the other communities, the service drives and the landscaping, sort of that phase 1 of Woodward, and maybe we'll wait and see. And I've talked to Hank a little bit about this a couple months ago or a month ago. But after we see what Birmingham comes up with in their resolution, maybe Huntington Woods, we could write up a similar resolution for Huntington Woods Council or City Commission to consider, saying we also want MDOT to look at the service drives and the landscaping, and we want to be part of, it could be a very simple resolution, but make sure MDOT doesn't forget about Huntington Woods when they're looking at Birmingham and Ferndale and Pleasant Ridge. So.
One other issue, MDOT likes 1-mile stops. So they're using 11 Mile Road, which is highly commercialized. It is not closest to any of the community's residents. The other thing, at least on the southbound side, there have been accidents impacting residents and people that live in the area. I would suggest that in addition to 11 Mile Road, that at Lincoln, which is 10.5 Mile Road, there be a stop added. It is the closest to population for Royal Oak and Huntington Woods, and one of the real demands that you have when you put a stop in is you have to have a certain demand. Oakland Community College is approximately 1/3 of a mile from that location. They used to have 3,000 students daily, and many of them were transit users. Royal Oak forced the routing through its own city on a lot of the bus routes, so it's underutilized on Woodward. I would hope that you could develop an argument for adding the additional stop there. The 10-mile stop is a parking lot stop. It's not walkable from either city, Royal Oak or Huntington Woods.
And I just want to point out for the record that while this has been discussed on many separate occasions, thank you. That we've discussed this on several different occasions. One thing that I do want to point out is that the Lincoln and Woodward intersection is actually 100% Royal Oak. So there's a little bit of a cooperative effort or us lobbying Royal Oak in order to get that. It does make sense. It absolutely does. And that's something that we would probably want to look at in our, if we could add something like that in, it may be worth our while. But with the understanding that that particular intersection is not in our control.
But it would be useful if it was commented on in the plan, even if we can't control
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Mary Maslin Cooper. I live at 13122 Talbot. 34-year resident of Huntington Woods, and I don't know how many of these I've attended over the years. But one of the things that I find, this is just for a usage thing, and it's about the way the plan has been put together. The first thing is that it's not, how would you take it out? It's not very user-friendly. It's difficult to read. It's in an 8 font or maybe a 7 font. It is very, very difficult to read when you have shading of letters. It should be more ADA compliant for people who can read it. The second thing that I would recommend doing is maybe gets rid of some of the confusion of what sustainability is in your report, because sustainability as defined in this meeting had to do with basically storm drains. And what I see in the action plan at the back of the plan is that about 70% of those items are checked as sustainability. And I don't think that's true. I think it's misleading. And I would maybe review it and take some of those away. There's very little in this report that has much to do with sustainability in this city. The other thing that I'd like to see happen is we have a series of goals, and the goals on page 22 seem to indicate quality of life issues for the residents of Huntington Woods. The issues that are being discussed here today are about economic development, and very little that I'm hearing on quality of life issues for Huntington Woods residents, except for perhaps a bike path that may or may not be needed. I don't have an opinion about it one way or the other. I do like the discussion about public transit. I'd like to see more of that happening around our city and whatever that's going to be. But in this particular plan, it's very misleading. And I would say what we mean to say and mean what we say and not diffuse things. For example, the demographic information is split up in at least 2 different places within your report. It should all be under one location and then referred to in the rest of the report. So we don't know when we read the demographics, what is the age? What is the age of our population and how is it aging? And the predictions from the last master plan indicated that we would have a lower population and we actually have a higher population. And so it's confusing and misleading, and it lacks a certain amount of transparency, beginning with the fonts and the colors and the use of pictures when we should actually be increasing the language so one can actually read it. That's all I have to say, but it's a lot of hard work, I know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary, just for clarification, Mary, is this what you're looking at for the fonts? Okay, that's a 2-page, that's not how the font, that's condensed for people to have for tonight. The way that it is, that's 1 page, that's another page. There's 2 pages on each one, so it all gets You're saying it's a pamphlet like this? No, yeah, I'm saying it's going to be like this. So then you'll have that, so each one of these will be significantly larger than what you're viewing it as. Yeah, no, it was just the easiest way that I could get it out to as many people as I could. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close public participation. Hank, what else before we wrap up for the night?
Well, I'll defer to MKSK to see if there's any other information they want. Other than that, I'll go after them. I'll let them.
Okay. Any closing remarks?
Just thank you again for letting us present the draft plan, and there's some really great comments from you and from the public tonight, so we'll take that into consideration. We look forward to getting the feedback on the comment sheets and your priority worksheets as well.
Yeah, I guess my key thing is if you can take that worksheet, and it's Friday, however you want to mark it up, but if you just say consolidate or isn't, just give us some general direction. If something needs better explanation or you don't remember this coming out or something, what you could say, like, what was the source for this recommendation? Just put a question, anything on there for us to take a look at, because then we're going to take this with your comments to consolidate it, simplify it, and then clean up the action plan and put in some, if you can, like the way I would do it, if I was listing it, is I would circle, like, what are the top 5 priorities, or somehow mark what you think is most important to, so the most important recommendations, and then other things that are important, and then other things that are less important or you don't think we need to address, or maybe can be consolidated somewhere else, so we can come up to a more digestible set of recommendations that we can look at. And if there's something you think through these meetings and so forth that you think is really missing, and to note that as well. So this is really the key thing, is mark that up, get it back through Hank within maybe by the end of the year, by like Christmas, and then we can spend a couple weeks, the beginning of the new year, get a revised plan, and especially a new action plan, get back to the Planning Commission to go through and feel everything's comfortable. All the things you brought up tonight, and we heard from the audience that's applicable, we'll address that as well, and come back and just have a presentation, just basically here are the changes that we've made based on the last plan, and if you're comfortable then, it would go on to the City Commission to start the 63-day review period. At the end of that period, then there would be a public hearing, another opportunity for the public to comment any changes to the plan, and then we'd look for the Planning Commission to adopt the plan and then forward it on to the City Commission to also adopt.
So Hank, will we just do the next review in a future Planning Commission meeting, or will we hold another special meeting for this?
At this point in time, we do not have a special meeting requested or planned. So what we would probably do is take a look at what they've done, the changes at the next regular Planning Commission meeting, which would be in January. At that point in time, we would hope that we would have the input from the public in and from the Planning Commission as well, and allow MKSK to take their time and get us the final product, or a lot closer to the finished product, the finish line, if you will. And that's where we would go. So we would be looking at the regular meeting in January. At this point, if something changes, I will absolutely let you know.
Okay, great.
The other thing that I did want to do is to take the opportunity here to thank the public for coming out tonight. I remember the one meeting that we had doors open and everything like that. Unfortunately, we're not having that same kind of weather. So I appreciate the efforts of the public to come on out and to take the time to comment. I would also encourage them to take a sheet available at the door, and if they haven't already, to fill that out and to let us know. Some of them that had some really excellent comments tonight that we would like to incorporate into the plan, but we need them to submit them in order to really do that. So we would appreciate that. Comments on the pieces of paper can be dropped off at the drop box, either in the east side lobby vestibule or through the drop box on the side between the Public Safety Building and City Hall, or emailed to me at hberry@hwmi.org. So we would love to do that. We'll get that to the consultants. And other than that, I just want to say thank you to everybody for being here.
Thanks, Hank. Appreciate it. So we are looking for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Sheldon, thank you. Second?
Second.
Jill? All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.
Thank
See
you.
next month.